Hi guys, welcome back to the garden channel. I'm excited to give you a little tour and we can see what's growing. So I thought I would do it by section because a lot of you have questions about herbs, some have questions about tomatoes, vine plants, and this way we can cover it all. I'll also give you a few tips for organic gardening when it comes to pests because I know that also can be an issue, and I'll show you what I do. All right, let's take a look. So over here, I have my mint growing. Now, one of the things that I do with mint is I put it in its own container because it's so aggressive. It just takes over. And in fact, I had hacked this all down this spring, like probably 2 months ago, and it just grows back with abandon. I mean, like, look at this. This is the most amazing thing. This time of year is these little insects move in, these little moths that start to chew away at the leaves. Do you guys see that? So one of the things that really helps with that is neem oil. And basically all you do is just give it a good spray on the plant. Just give it a good spray. And I do this to control these moths. Now what I think I might end up doing actually is cutting it all down again, and it'll grow right back. Like in a month from now, it'll be beautiful. Okay, then over here I have some beautiful thyme. So I have two different types of thyme that I grow. This is a French thyme, and you can tell that it's the French thyme because it's a little bit, I don't know, it's a little bit more wiry. Do you see that? It's not as like thick and luscious as the English thyme. I like to grow both because I think the French thyme is a little bit more pronounced in flavor, where the English thyme is a little bit more subtle. Now you can totally see, look at my thyme, it's flowering. This all needs to be pruned. You have to prune the herbs. So you're either going to prune them, which is basically taking about 2 inches off the top, or you're gonna harvest them, either one. And I have not spent a lot of time out in this garden the last few weeks because I have been learning to shoot my own videos for my food channel, which is a whole other story. So if you've been following me on that journey, you probably know how busy I've been trying to figure that out. But I've got that kind of under control, so now I can spend more time out here. So this is what I will be doing this weekend, is pruning all of my herbs, because you can see a lot of them are flowering. So here I have some beautiful sage that is growing. Look at that, isn't it gorgeous? But there are parts of it that are also flowering. See, like here? You just want to pick that off. And the reason you want to do that is what's happening is that plant will then go to seed. So once it flowers, that flower will then turn to seed, and it's basically the plant reaching the end of its life cycle. So we don't want to do that because we want to keep our beautiful sage for the fall when I need it for all of my delicious sweet potato recipes. I come right out here for the sage, and it's great. I'm also getting flowers on the oregano, which I don't know, I kind of also think it's quite beautiful. So I leave a few flowers just so that I can put them in arrangements. So that's the thing you can do with it. If you're pruning your herbs, save a few and make arrangements. One of the things that's really great about thyme, sage, oregano, and rosemary and the mint is that it's perennial, so it'll come back every year. So if you are looking for like low maintenance gardening, go with perennial herbs, because once you plant it and get it established, all you have to do is prune it and keep it healthy, fertilize it. So that's another thing you need to do with herbs. I give it just a really great organic fertilizer every few weeks during the growing season, just to kind of pump it up a bit, and then work a little bit into the soil in the spring as well. I really love the Dr. Earth brand of fertilizers. I can't say enough about them. I think that they're one of the best. So as we go through, I'm going to be giving you some product recommendations for different things that I love to use. I'll be sure to link to everything that's available in the description so you can go check it out. Okay, so while we are on the topic of herbs, I wanted to show you over here my poor transplanted basil plants. These poor things. They are in the intensive care unit. I put them in this little planter in hopes that I can bring them back to life. They just got completely eaten, and what I do is I just come out here every so often. I will pick off any leaf that has a hole in it, because once you start to have leaves that have holes in it like that, it's just inviting all kinds of disease and more pests. And then I'll also kind of clip off the top. Here we go. I will harvest these leaves, you know, put them in little pastas and stuff like that. Just because basil is pretty forgiving, and it's also pretty prolific, so it will just keep growing, and I'm hoping it's going to have a really nice comeback story. I also like to use mulch. So this year I'm using hay mulch, and what that does is it keeps the moisture in the soil. So here in Southern California, this garden gets so hot. Like, I've been waiting all day to shoot out here because it was so sunny and so hot and so bright that as soon as it gets watered in the morning, like, it really does evaporate pretty quickly. The mulch will also keep your weeds at bay, so you don't have to weed as much. And it also will keep a nice barrier between the soil and the plant. And this is important because a lot of times diseases are in the soil, a lot of like viruses and fungus, which will actually start to destroy your plant. I had that happen this year with the tomatoes, which we're gonna get to in a minute. So any type of mulch down is really good. And then I also will prune any of the leaves that might be hitting the soil. So you don't want those leaves to touch the soil because again, that's how diseases can enter the plant. So the mulch helps with that. So while we are on the subject of herbs, I wanted to talk about these chives for a minute. So I love to grow what's called flowering chives. So you can see they create the most beautiful blossoms, this beautiful violet color, and they're perfectly edible. So what I will do is oftentimes put them in salads, or if I'm making some type of scrambled egg, I will take some of the flowering chives and sprinkle those around. You do need to prune these too. This is another little project I'll be doing this weekend. So you want to trim them down to about here. Cut this all back, even the blossoms. And what you will end up getting is more blossoms and more chives, and it'll just make for a healthier plant. Cilantro. Let's have a chat about cilantro. This is an empty pot that has some cilantro seeds that I've just started. The thing with cilantro is that it bolts very, very easily. So bolting means when the plant just grows very, very tall and is basically reaching the end of its life cycle, and it will seed and then it's basically dying. So cilantro is not perennial, so it's season by season, and once it bolts, it's kind of really hard to bring it back to life. So I had some beautiful cilantro on the other side of the garden, but it was in a much sunnier spot. So the more sun it gets, and I've also heard when daylight savings kicks in and you get a lot more daylight, that also will force it to bolt a lot quicker. So I'm starting over again. This is in a cooler part of the garden, so it gets less sun exposure. So if you are a beginner, stick around. And one of the things we're going to talk about is creating a sun chart. So it's really important to get to know your yard, to know how many hours of sun you have in each part of the yard, because that will help you plant the right plants. Some need more sun, some can deal with a little bit of shade. And I learned that painful lesson this year with my cilantro. This area only gets about 3 hours of sun, which is much better than the other area that was getting 9 hours. Yeah, it was just too much. I wanted to show you and talk about some of the vine plants that I'm growing. So these are melons. They are Hale's Best cantaloupe, which are really delicious, super sweet, and easy to grow for the home gardener. So I set out these cloches when I have small plants that I need to protect. So you can see right here, aren't these fabulous? Oh my gosh, I love these. I think they're so pretty. This is the smallest little melon plant, and I keep the cloche on at the night time. So right now it's about 6 o'clock at night, and I just put that on right there because it prevents the raccoons from going in and digging up the plant. So we have a family of raccoons here. They go in and they take the littlest plant because it's the easiest to pull out. They pull it out, and then they get in there with their little hands and they take the worms. So I actually have a very soft spot for raccoons. I don't know, they look like big furry cats to me. So I don't want to hurt them in any way. I just want to discourage them from doing that. So what I do is I put these cloches on, and for whatever reason, they're kind of afraid of them. I don't even try to pick them up. I would think they'd be smart enough to know how to pick them up, but they don't. They just leave them there, and then the plant can really establish itself, and then they won't try to dig up a plant that's more mature and more established. So that has been working for my raccoons. Now, if you have other critters that are nibbling in your garden, over here I have one more solution I can show you. So these are my little guard kitties. I got these online. Aren't they the cutest things? And they are a set of 3, and they come in all these different funny poses. So this one looks like he's crouched down. He's got the marble eyes, which glow in the dark at night. And then they have a little stake that you can put them in the ground. So I had some raccoons that were digging up some young thyme plants because I wanted to fill in this little hole here because I have this beautiful patch, but I had this little hole. They kept digging it up because it was such a young plant. So I put this little kitty there, and now they don't come back. I had to take the thyme plant out because it died, so I'm seed starting some more, but the kitty was pretty effective. Although one tip with the cats that I've learned, you have to move them around the garden. So I have 3 of them, and I move them around. So I guess, I don't know, it looks like the cats have moved. So it's not the same cat because I'm afraid they have gotten smart. I have seen some digging, but when I move the cats around, it seems to be more effective. So that could be. So the other thing to know about melon, I think vine plants in general really, is they can really take off. So you'll see I only have 3 here. because these will start to take over. And in years past, I've planted too many and they grew all over the parterre, all through the gravel, under the table. It was like totally insane. So now this year I've gotten smart and I'm gonna try to see if they will grow up this trellis. We will see. It's a really great little contraption that actually folds so I can keep it in my garden cabin after the season is over. And I'm hoping I can just get these plants and train them and to grow up it. And hopefully that will do the trick. So we shall see. So these are my two hottest plots in the garden. These are the two plots that get about 9 hours of sun. So that's why I put the melons and the zucchini. The two heat lovers are going here. Zucchini has been hard for me to grow simply because it always ends up getting the fungus, see? And what you typically will see is the leaves will get really spotted. You have to pick them off. So once you see that, you have to pick them off. And I've been pretty vigilant with this plant, and then new leaves grow in its place. And then if you see more fungus, you have to spray it. So that's what I've been doing with the neem oil, a little bit more of that. And that has been seemingly doing the trick. But it just blossomed, and soon we'll start to see some fruit. And hopefully I can keep this fungus at bay. And the other thing that zucchini doesn't like is to get its leaves wet. So if you're watering, make sure you water in the very early morning because if you water at night, it just invites all kinds of pests and disease as it sits there and doesn't have a chance to evaporate during the day. So if any of these vine plants like the melons, the zucchini, cucumbers, they don't like to get their leaves wet, and that also will invite the fungus. So other than that, I don't know. I've had real problems with zucchini. So I would love any tips if anybody is growing zucchini, and maybe it's just too hot here. I don't know. Let me know. All right, the tomato plants are always my crowning glory. I love growing tomatoes. And if you are new to growing tomatoes, I highly recommend checking out my tomato video, and I'll link to it in the description. It gives you all the tips, everything you need to know about growing tomatoes. But if you want a quick overview, here it is. So this tomato plant is a Kellogg's Breakfast, and this is an heirloom tomato plant, and I typically only grow heirlooms only because I think they're the more interesting varieties, and they're the kinds that you can't get at a grocery store, so you might as well get something interesting, right? And if you ask me, the best way to grow an heirloom tomato is to seed start yourself, because there are so many great varieties you can get in seed that you're never going to find as a transplant. So this is a plant that I seed started. I'm really excited because this year I invested in these fabulous garden markers. Aren't these great? They're made by a very talented artist on Etsy, and based on the fact that I pretty much grow the same tomato varieties year after year, I thought I would just invest in these so that you can remember which one it is. This tomato is in desperate need of pruning. So this is an indeterminate tomato. So tomatoes find themselves in two categories. You'll see determinate and indeterminate. So determinate means they have a very determined amount of time that they are going to grow and set fruit. They usually will set fruit earlier in the season, and then once they give their fruit, they're kind of done and that's it. Where an indeterminate plant will grow all through the summer, continuing to give you fruit until it basically dies. So your first frost or whenever your season is over, then it's done. The problem with indeterminate tomatoes is they grow to be monsters, like huge. They can grow to be 9 feet tall. So you really need to stake them, or what I prefer is to put them in a cage. So I think the best way to grow a tomato is to put it in a planter like this, or terracotta or wine barrel, whatever you have, and then use one of these tomato cages because that really keeps it in place. So you can see I have some beautiful blossoms here, and the blossoms are what is going to set into fruit. But let's have a conversation for a minute about suckers. Yes, tomato suckers, and here is one right here. It's a little offshoot that usually comes off one of the main leader stems and the leaf stem. It's usually in the middle. And basically what you want to do with that is trim it off. So because it's a little small, I could just snap it off. But see, they get really big if you leave them unattended. So see this? Here's a big one, and see how big it's gotten? And it might even have, does it have blossoms on it? No, it doesn't have blossoms on it. But this one, I want to take with my pruning shears, see, because it's a little too big to pluck it off like that. And you want a nice clean cut so that you don't invite disease. stay there. We're gonna cut that off. Now the reason you wanna do this is because the suckers are taking a lot of energy from the plant. And the more energy the plant is giving to these suckers, the less energy they can give to the fruit. But you don't wanna overdo it, especially if you live, like I do, in a very hot, sunny climate, because a lot of those suckers sometimes can give you shade, which is what I desperately need in this garden. Otherwise, what will end up happening is your fruit can actually scald and get sunburned. So you don't want that. Let me show you what happens when you don't prune them. Look at this poor tomato plant. It is like totally unruly. This is the tomato that I'm not exactly sure what it is, although I think it's an old German, if I had to guess. At first I thought it was a pineapple tomato, but I actually, looking at it now in the coloration, I think it's an old German. So chime in, tomato lovers, and let me know what you think it is. But see how, like, this is what will happen. If you don't prune it, because my tomato cage stops here, and it's a pretty tall cage, but that just shows you like how tall these tomatoes can get. It will start to bend because of the weight of the fruit. And I really should prune that off now, but I just can't help myself because I see this gorgeous specimen forming, and I am a terrible sentimental gardener, and I will just leave things here because I don't have the heart to prune it. And what I have learned about gardening is that there is no room for sentimentality. If there is a plant that needs to be tended, it doesn't matter if it has blossoms, if it has fruit, you have to prune it for its own good. Same with if you have tomatoes that start to wilt and they start to turn yellow and they look unhealthy, you are better off just shutting it down, just getting rid of it, because that can spread and it can really affect the harvest of all your other plants too. So take it from me, don't be sentimental. If there is a plant that needs to be pruned, you're better off pruning it because you'll be happier later. Now, one thing that I did do right with this plant is I got rid of all the leaves on the bottom. So what can happen with tomato leaves? They also don't like to get their leaves wet. So when you water your tomato plant, just go in at the bottom and water here. Don't like spray the whole thing with water, because that also invites a lot of viruses, fungus, disease, and we don't want that. But you basically want to get rid of these leaves at the bottom, because when you are watering, the water can splash up from the soil if you don't have mulch down and also invite disease. So I usually pluck those off when the plant is pretty young, just because it'll make the plant a little bit stronger and healthier. But you can see this one is in need of some pruning. So again, another project for the weekend. But look at these gorgeous tomatoes. I mean, like, look at this thing. So pretty. Oh my gosh. And this one, sometimes they call these heirloom tomatoes ugly tomatoes because, like, look at that cluster. It's just so funny. But I would much rather take an ugly tomato than a perfectly round supermarket tomato. They're just going to taste so much better. You can see there's not a lot of foliage here shading this poor tomato. And you can see it's starting to get a little sun scald. So that's when you see all the color is sort of stripped out of it. It almost looks white in areas. That's a tomato that is getting too much sun exposure. So I think what I might actually do is pick this pretty soon and let it ripen on the countertop. So that's the thing. You got to know when to pick them. Like this one, I probably would give it a few more days and then pick it. You want to make sure that it's firm to the touch and that it has good color on it. Because if you let a tomato sit too long, it'll start to crack in places, and that means the tomato's getting overripe. Okay, so over here, these are my Satsuma orange trees, and I have 2 of them growing here, and I've topiaried them, which the key thing with these trees is you have to keep them pruned at all times of the year, I found. That's how you get the most fruit. I have been very disciplined. I think because of the quarantine, I'm home a lot. So I have been out here just pruning this, making sure that it stays in its nice little ball shape. And you basically just want to go in and make sure that, like, any of these branches that are growing into the tree, you cut off. And you just want to get rid of, like, any growth that is dying. And these are like the most delicious oranges. These are the oranges that are super easy to peel. They come up in December, so around Christmas time, and we always have them for dessert. They're really great after like a really rich chocolate holiday dessert. Bring a plate of Satsuma oranges, and my kids and I will have a contest who can peel it in one go. Because the peel is so far away from the fruit, they're super easy to peel and so delicious. I can't say enough about the Satsuma oranges. They are a great variety to grow. And then over here, this is my newest citrus tree to the little citrus family. I have citrus I call it Citrus Alley because I have all of these different planters that line up our driveway to the garage. And because it's such a sunny part of our yard, they do so well here. These are Caracara oranges, which are really fabulous. And again, I've topiaried them, and you just got to keep pruning it. Make sure that you get rid of kind of any growth that starts on the main stem there. This is the first year that I've had this tree, and I'm already getting some fruit. They're a very sweet and mellow orange. In fact, my kids say they taste like gummy bears. They're really delicious, great for snacking. We just love them, so I had to get 2 of them so that we have a nice plentiful supply. If you've been thinking about doing a garden and you haven't gotten there yet, I wanted to give you these tips because I think it'll really help when you get out there and start to plant things. Now, my first tip is to start a garden journal. This might sound like a ton of work at first, but actually your future self will thank you. And basically what that is get yourself a notebook, just any kind of journal really. I like the kind that doesn't have lines in it so that you can actually draw. And basically what I've drawn here is the layout of our garden. So our garden is separated into parterres, and I basically just put what the season is, so we're talking summer 2020, and then we have one section with 4 parterres here and another section with 4 parterres down at the bottom, and it's separated by a table. And basically what I do is I just say what I have planted so that I know where I planted it, and I gave each parterre a number. The reason why this is important is you want to track what you planted where and how it did. And this becomes very handy the next summer when you go back and you think, oh yeah, wait, I planted that variety, it didn't do so well, this one did really well. So the easiest way to do that is just each page is dedicated to a different vegetable or fruit. So you can see here, you just take the tag that comes on the plant. So in this case, it was a Caracara navel pink orange. So I planted that in February. And basically what I did is I put all the growing information here so I can reference that. And then I put when I planted it. So that's good. I can kind of track the progress of when I think the fruit should appear or the vegetable. And then any notes. What did I say here? Oh, that it started flowering right away and the fruit was already set when I bought the tree. So that's good to know. Okay, then the other thing that I highly recommend is to create a sun chart. And basically what you do is you have a column for sun and a column for shade. And starting at the bottom of my garden here, starting at 7 a.m. is when this section starts to get the most sun. Then at 7:30, it creeps all the way down my plots until 3 p.m. when the whole garden is basically in sun, except what's happening at that time is this part that started with the sun starts to get shady. So then I track the shade all the way up. And basically what that does is tells you how many hours of sunshine you have in each section of the garden. So this is 8 hours, that's 9 hours, this is 4 hours, and this is 3 hours. I cannot tell you how valuable this information is, because if you're planting something that needs a ton of sun, like cantaloupes or melon, you want to make sure that you put them in that section that's getting that 8 to 9 hours of sun. Or if you're planting lettuce and you don't want it to roast, especially here in Southern California, that's my problem, I'm going to put them back in the 3-hour zone. So it's a really great thing to get to know your property and figure out when it's sunny and when it's shady. And a sun chart will do the trick. Another great thing to track is where you bought the seeds. I can't say enough about seed starting, especially this time during the quarantine. I can't get to my local nursery, but I can mail order all kinds of seeds and just seed start them. And I have a great video if you want to know more about how to do that from beginning to end, and I'll link to it below. But basically, not all seed companies are alike. I know, that's sort of the truth of the matter. I have my favorite seed companies, and I'll leave you their names in the description, but if you're not buying a quality seed, it might really affect their viability. So you'll plant all these seeds and nothing will come up, and you think you've done something wrong, when in fact the seeds may not be fresh, there might be something wrong with them. Because of the quarantine, these seed companies have gotten totally slammed, and so I had a few situations where I couldn't get some of my favorite seeds and ordered from other companies, and right now I have this basil plant. It's so sad, but it definitely shows you there's only one plant that actually made it, and the rest of the cells are empty. So that's probably seeds that were not very good. So that's a teachable moment for any of you out there. Definitely start with quality seeds. And then how do you organize your seeds? So I really love this idea. So this is just a recipe box. And many of you that are subscribed to my food channel might remember that I was actually selling these for a while. I had recipes printed of some of my favorite recipes. Sadly, the company went out of business, so we're no longer offering the boxes, which is such a shame because they're so beautiful. But I find they make for great seed organizers. So you can find many of these on Etsy. Many artists even make seed saving boxes. So they're really helpful because when you start growing, you're gonna have a ton of these seed packets, and it's really hard to sort of organize them, and you wanna keep them in a cool, dry place. And I find that these recipe boxes work perfectly. And I have mine organized by tomatoes, vines, herbs, flowers, edible flowers. So you decide what makes sense for you and then just keep them all in the box. And if you would like to know more about how my own garden came to be, you can watch my before and after garden story. And I think it'll inspire you because it'll show you that gardens just don't happen overnight. They are years in the making. So you can click here and I'll see you over there.